Hello and welcome to Conversations about Language Teaching. I'm your host, Dr. Reed Riggs, he, him.
I am Dr. Diane Neubauer, she, her.
This
And
episode is, oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and this time you're going to lead this one, Reed. So
Yeah.
go for it. But
Okay.
it's the awkward pause. Now I'm going to go. That's it.
You got cut up a little bit. Say that last part again.
Oh, I was saying, when there's an awkward pause, what people do to try to quote repair it, unquote,
Yeah.
goes back to our episode about conversation analysis. So
Yeah. No, the whole point of this format is that it's not edited.
correct.
But to be honest, we do edit sometimes when the episode runs out of time, and then we'll splice in.
Yeah, but that's pretty
picking it
minimal.
up.
And
Yeah.
I sometimes chop a little bit of total silence at the very beginning, just so
That's fair.
it doesn't happen.
Well, we did have a conversation right before recording about who would host. So that's
Yep.
for total transparency. There we go.
Yeah.
So today's episode is about AI chatbots. We have a little tiny bit of experience with it, and we thought let's run with that because our show is usually about our overall views of the goals of language teaching with a view on what we understand to be going on with language development in the mind, in social interaction, in society, in our personal experience. And so that
It's often about process.
yeah, not just, goals, process, how things work. And so I think we have enough little bit of experience with AI chatbots in a classroom with learners that we can say a little bit about it, and then we think we'll come back to AI, other topics later in the future. So we started talking about this really recently, probably within the last week or so. I had tried an AI chatbot with my 10th graders last semester, and the first thing they started doing was, as I was leading it, I was projecting my computer, sharing my computer screen onto the big screen, and I was asking the students to give ideas about what we can ask it to learn something about Chinese culture. And I think I had told the chatbot I want a friendly chatbot that stays at the Cepher A2 level. That's the Common European Framework of Reference.
I was gonna say that's.
And Cepher A2 is probably somewhere around ACTFL, maybe intermediate, something like that.
What I've heard is, A2, B1 is kind of intermediate-ish.
Yeah.
So,
and I haven't tried A1.
Daily life, high frequency stuff is pretty well covered.
Sure.
In terms of vocabulary and context, and but maybe more complex things or hypotheticals or argumentation, some of those more complex things to do with language are a little past that level.
Yeah. So we also told it to focus on the history of China society today, history of Singapore society today, and history of Hawaii society today. And I thought that would cover the areas that we want to get into. The IB really pushes for international mindedness, and so when we talk about China, we never want to focus just on China. I like Singapore because it's a geographically very separate place. It's a very mixed country, and Chinese is definitely part of it. I've discovered recently that they also use simplified Chinese characters, which Taiwan and Hong Kong don't. And so when I'm looking for videos to share with my students, and we use simplified characters, it's a perfect fit. Checks all those boxes. So anyways, I'll come back to that. Yeah.
A question about your prompting it. Did you design those prompts in Chinese and type them in Chinese, or did you use English?
English.
I found the prompting can be a factor in what you get. Like, and I haven't figured out if it's better to use the language that's the L1 of learners or the L2 of learners. I've tried it more with the L2 approach.
Yeah.
Because of the results I got when I tried prompting it for something else in L1.
Yeah.
It's like I confused it when I used L1, but it sounds like it worked for you.
So I confused it when in my newest attempt a week ago, when I said we want to learn about pandan. It's these green leaves that make a kind of flavor extract that goes into drinks and cakes. And it's popular all throughout Southeast Asia, including Singapore. And so, one of our class videos was a recipe for making pandan extract from the leaves. And so it's a pandan extract and one other topic. And what it ended up doing, I said that in English, and then in Chinese it said, 好，我们谈熊猫和什么什么, which is panda, the animal, the panda. And we had to
Is it
kind
that you had a
of,
typo?
no, it's pandan, but it just
Switched.
registered PANDAN as panda. It just did its best to
Weird.
assume. So the students caught it pretty quickly. Um, so this is again comes back to this main problem I found and how I fixed it pretty effectively. So the students last semester, and this is why I abandoned it at the time, is they started saying, "Oh, let's see what it does when you ask it for information that can't be possibly true." And so they started asking me for prompts. They started saying like, "Okay, ask it about like the current president of China, if he was like what he did during his life in the Qing dynasty 2000 years ago." It's like just
Mm,
not real things because they
right.
wanted to see
See
what the
what it would
chatbot
do.
would do.
Yeah.
And that then led to just side talk and talking and the students sharing stories in English about their experiences with AI and chatbots.
Mm.
And it was all very interesting, but it caught me off guard. And I just kind of sat back and listened and thought, this is off task and we're not doing
Yes.
what I wanted to do. And so I scrapped it at the time. Then we
Yeah.
recently had a whole faculty meeting talking about our school is going to try to sort of start to figure out how we're going to integrate AI
Mhm.
directly into our teaching. And I thought, okay, I have that little footing. I've tried that little thing. I tried it because I had just gone to the HALT Fall Symposium, the Hawaii Association of Language Teachers, and it was Dr. Rachel Mamiya Hernandez who did a presentation where she walked us through Magic School and showed us this chatbot.
Yeah.
By the way, I found in Magic School there's also a language tutor bot, and I tried both. And that language tutor is not at all what I want. It turned
Yeah.
everything into vocabulary quizzes and said, I can test you
Hmm.
on vocabulary. And I was like, I don't know.
Like,
I'm
no,
communi
that's not what we're
I'm
talking about when we're,
yeah, I
yeah.
want communication. I want these to be communication experiences.
But so fascinating that what it thinks language teaching is
Yeah.
still the default
Yeah.
thing, vocabulary drilling and
Yeah.
let's look at language pieces
Let's
and
break
study
down the
them
language. Yeah.
and memorize them and
Yeah.
produce them and practice them and see if you're accurate, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
assuming
Yeah.
it's going to
Yeah.
give you feedback about that. And it's frustrating because there's more understanding than that out there now.
It assumes a structuralist perspective that so many language
Yeah.
teachers, I think by default have. And then it doesn't assume a communicative outlook
Right.
that I am strong in. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
the chatbot, that's what I went with. Okay, so this time I wrote on the board and I wanted to really get my feet wet and see if I could make this successful. So I wrote on the board, goal, colon, learn culture. Next line, not goal, colon, test the chatbot. And so
Yes.
for the
So now
first,
you're prompting your students.
I'm telling my student, well, it's an agenda. It's just what you write on the board. It's like, here's what we're doing. And what was
Right.
interesting, I always kind of wonder, like, oh, are they going to ignore it? Are they going to, gloss over it? Are they going to care? Everyone, their eyes were like zoomed in on those goals, and everyone was nodding, like, oh, okay, yeah, like that made sense to them. So I was
Yeah,
like,
we
okay,
can
cool,
get behind that
do
then.
this.
Yes. See, you've got a prompt that worked.
It works.
If people are listening, if you haven't heard that term for prompt, like working with AI, it's called prompting. And so you have to give the scope and what are the parameters of the kind of outputs that you want from the AI, and then re-prompting as you get a result. And like, okay, this is okay, but now fix this part. Now expand on this part. And yeah, going back and forth a lot. I think it's not a magical poof, and
Yeah,
it's got it perfect necessarily. You have to really think about how
yeah.
to each time you're using it. So
Well, you used it
yeah. So now you've
recently.
done it with your students.
Yeah, and we talked about how many sentences it should produce each time, and you had an experience with that.
I did, because I'm just testing this out for the potential of using it also to talk about Chinese history, to allow students in a small group class online with me this summer, potentially. I'm doing a book study where we'll be looking at a chapter of a book that relates to the Chinese Cultural Revolution, the 1960s and 70s, very dramatic time of upheaval. And so I wanted to see what it could do. And I was also trying the magic school thing because you had suggested that place. Um, I know there are others that are maybe even by subscription. And I just wanted to see, could I even get this to work at all? And the immediate results were, I did get it to hold pretty well within, I told it act full proficiency levels of novice, mid, novice, high. So they can understand full sentences. They've got a certain breadth of vocabulary. They're maybe not producing paragraphs easily on their own, but they might string together sentences. So again, kind of thinking maybe a little bit step back from what you just described as the results that you were looking for. And the immediate results were pretty well within that. But then they were long. They were very long. And if they were bullet point long, I wouldn't have minded. And they did have some of that, but it was also like, I need to have it way shorter than 12 sentences for a student to reasonably go back and forth like it's a conversational thing. And so I asked for, don't exceed 3-sentence answer at ever. So and I did prompt it in Chinese. So that was it. But interestingly, in Magic School, the chatbots output, as if facing my students, were partly in Chinese and partly in English. They kind of gave a little background information in English, which I like. I like that because then everybody kind of quickly gets on board using their first language, and now they can go into the task kind of with a sense of confidence, like this is what I'm looking for. It helps them with the comprehension level of the reading. The other nice thing about, I tried out the read it aloud to me. So that was sweet. So the voicing I thought was quite natural. I wasn't expecting it to sound as good as it did. So it can read aloud the results. I wish it could slow down a little bit more. You can choose to slow it to 0.75. You can do it at regular speed, or I think at 0.25 and 1.25 and 1.5. And no, not faster for a language learner. I need like a 0.5 probably.
Yeah. So I think the reason they don't, I've tried other text to voice AI bots, and you can choose like different women and men. You can choose different Chinese dialects even, and
nice.
each man has a different speaker style. Each woman has a different speaker style. When you get below 0.75, you start to get a clippy, choppy quality, and it's just not desirable anymore. It makes it harder to understand. So there's kind of that they might not include the 0.5. Yeah.
With technology.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing though that was nice was after you get answers, the user of this chatbot could make other adjustments too. So there was a speed adjustment, there was a read aloud option, there was a shorter or longer answer option. So but again, I was trying it out with a real need that I have in the future in mind, mostly for adults and maybe some teens that might be in that class. But I was also thinking of K to 12 language teachers, and like if I were trying to program it for that, I don't think students are as keen and as proactive necessarily as to go look for things that give them options like, oh, whoa, they gave me this huge long paragraph.
Right.
It's going to take me a long time to read. I don't think they're going to look for a thing that they click and then goes, oh, it says that I can make it shorter. So I did that because I'm trying it out in all the things.
Yeah. Part of my instruction after the cultural content it should talk about is responses should be ideally 1 sentence, sometimes 2 sentences, and rarely 3 sentences. And
That's
I find
that is what
it does. Yeah. Most responses are 2 sentences. And once in a while I get 3. So it's good at knowing it following that instruction.
Yeah. Yeah. I tested that too. And when I told it to shorten and keep within no more than 3, it was usually 2, I think.
Yeah.
Nice. 1 or 2. And and again, kept fairly basic in vocabulary, but it did introduce terms like people's names, like Mao Zedong came up.
Yeah.
I want to say there were, fan piao. Is that right? Like the meal ticket thing where they were rationing food.
Right.
That they used the term for that. And so I wanted to try, if a student were confused by a section, I just copied a section of a whole sentence that included a vocabulary item that I thought would be a new word. And I plugged it in and I added 是什么意思? In other words, what does this mean?
Oh.
And it went back and explained it in multiple ways. And before I had shortened the answers, it was a really good answer actually, because it gave me like 5 or 6 different kind of bullet point listed options for another way to say that was simpler. So like somewhere in there, this novice, mid, novice, high learner was probably going to recognize most of what they needed to be able to understand it better.
The
So
explanation
that
was
was cool.
mostly in English.
It was all Chinese.
Oh, Chinese. Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a different
yeah.
set of language being
It,
used there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, so I was thinking like, oh, if I were getting a student ready for this, I think I would have a copy paste document that they could have where they
Yeah.
have the what does this mean? What does this mean? What
Hmm.
does this word mean?
Yeah.
Or what how do you spell this in
Yeah.
pinyin? So maybe there's a new word that they aren't sure how the pinyin would relate to that.
Yeah.
Of course they can hear it read aloud, but if they
Yeah.
want to be sure.
In
So
a sort
that
of, yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I liked that seemed to work very smoothly. It immediately responded to it. Um, I did. Do you have something on that? Because I have another little diversion about some of the results that I got.
Well, mine, I was gonna transition into using like what you can do with it after, like
Oh, okay.
all the text generated. So we can come back to that. Yeah.
Then yeah, let me say this other one because it relates. The other thing that I didn't test that I would like to test was, well, it's about 2 things. One thing was I didn't test it if I, as the learner using the chatbot, if I started mixing Chinese and English, what would the chatbot do with that? Would it continue to stay in Chinese?
Oh.
Would it start doing language mixing like that?
Hmm.
Or I would just want to know.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, oh shoot, I had it.
Hmm. Well, I can
This is
jump
an
in. So
unedited
one of
pod.
the things I was doing with my students was
Yeah, go for it.
I was just thinking it's part of the goal that I had, part of the, not the learning outcome, but the process goal was that we would do it together. And it's a lot like other classroom activities and tasks where we are using the language to do something together. And so we're discussing the prompt and then we're
Mhm.
putting in the prompt. Now, I used, because it was my first time introducing this to my students, I used a lot of English this time. I hope it becomes routine. And so then I can just start to use Chinese to lead the whole thing. But it was really the process of like me typing in and them watching me type in the question. And sometimes they'd ask in English and then I would kind of reformulate it into like decent, simple Chinese.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, typing that prompt or typing the question in Chinese was part of the language experience that I wanted them to have. And then when the answer came out, we would read it together and kind of discover the answer together. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. And then you're training them on maybe how they might use it independently
that
afterwards.
is,
Is
yeah.
that
So that
what
is
you're thinking?
definitely a goal that I didn't say to them. What I did say to them is that we just had a big faculty meeting. The school is trying to figure out how to work towards teaching usage of AI. And so we're going to do this together today. I didn't weave in more mentions of like, so when you're at home, you can do this by yourself. I actually have extra thoughts about that. And I think there are limitations to asking
Yes.
students to use AI on their own. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the other thing that I forgot momentarily a few
Mm.
minutes ago. And that was that it was easily distracted from the exact topic that I was trying to keep it to.
Uh-huh.
That was something that started to happen in the results because it at the bottom, after it responds to the user, it gives an answer. And then there's a couple of prompts for the user, like, oh, do you like this question? Do you like that question?
Hmm.
And so when I started out trying the chatbot with just a general, hey, how are you today? It replied to that. And it
Hmm.
never got towards, it even started it out, hi, in English, saying
Yeah.
something about, what kind of persona it was supposed to be. And we're here to talk about the Chinese Cultural Revolution.
Yeah.
And then when I said, hi, how are you today? It responded to that and said, how are you? Well,
Mm.
it's a little cold. Yeah, it's winter. And I'm like, okay.
Mm. Off topic. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Right.
So like the chatbot
Yeah.
could not go, hey, the weather during the Cultural Revolution, blah, blah, blah,
Sure.
like
Sure.
something to try to transition.
That's
And so and
interesting.
then the prompts at the bottom where it was suggesting possible next questions for the user to try out. also were not on topic, even if my previous
Yeah.
discussion with the chatbot was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're trying to steer it towards really
Sure.
staying within a certain frame, that it might not,
That could be
unless,
taught pretty easily, I
yes,
think, to students. Is just tell students that
but
it will not stay on topic. You have to keep it on topic.
right.
So that, yeah, one question came up among my juniors. We were talking about, we'd been watching street interviews in Shanghai about, do you drink coffee or tea? How much do you spend per year on coffee or tea? And so that was a video we'd watched and they were studying it. And so I said, let's continue on that by learning more through this chatbot. And so one of the first questions one of my juniors asked was, oh, okay, ask it if it prefers coffee or tea.
Hmm.
And had to think for a second, and then I pointed up at my goals on the board, and I said, "That's testing the chatbot and not learning culture,
Right.
because we don't care what
Yeah.
it
We're
hallucinates about
we're
drinking
not here to
coffee and
have a new
tea."
avatar friend.
Right, right.
This is,
Yeah, we want it to tell us about Chinese society. Another problem we ran into was when, so my uh, sophomores, they had been reading about train workers who don't get to go home for the Chinese New Year, and they have to work on the train through the Chinese New Year. And so the students said, "Oh, let's find out what foods they eat." And so I typed, "Okay, 你过年的时候火车列车员吃什么?" So it's, during the Lunar New Year, what do the or Spring Festival, what do the train workers eat? And it just gave a very matter of fact answer. It said, during the Spring Festival, the train workers have to work. And so they bring a simple dinner, usually jiaozi, dumplings, and a box lunch. And then there's also a special car on the train that can serve simple New Year's foods. And in the moment, all of us were like, our response was like, oh, that's really sweet. That's nice that they get that. That's really cool. And then I said, hold on, wait. I
this,
have no way to
yeah.
verify that information. It might
Right.
just be searching some texts and merging some words that it found through similar words in our prompt. And if there's no source on this, if this information does not exist on the internet, it may have just pulled together something general about trains that it found, Chinese trains,
Yeah.
something general about Chinese New Year's meals that it found, something general that it found about train workers that we know that article exists because we read that article. And so that's the input data that it's feeding on to merge text together that ends up
Mhm.
looking like information. And so one of my students said, "Oh, ask it for its sources." And so I said, "Can you provide sources on that?" And then the next response was like 对不起, like sorry. In
Mhm.
Chinese, it said, "Not enough research has been done on this topic, and so a clear answer. I cannot give a clear answer." And
Yeah.
so that's another pitfall. And when I watch my colleagues say things like, "Oh, I think ChatGPT, it's pretty good. I'll have it generate a science explanation paragraph, and I check it, and it's pretty good, and I think students can use it." Or I check it and I have to fix a little bit, or I check it, and if it's not good, I'll make another prompt. You're a content
You're the
area
expert.
expert who can make those checks. The
Yes,
students, by their very nature, are here to learn and cannot make those checks. So,
exactly.
so like if it's something they already know, then you can have them do something additional and then compare it with the information they already know. But to try to
Yeah.
learn new information,
Yeah. It's
they
very
don't
iffy.
they don't have the ability to verify what's real and not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
In AI stuff, they'll call it a hallucination. And it's a huge problem with, like, I had some university students obviously using some sort of AI to generate content for a research paper because I could not find the source on the internet. The AI would produce reasonable sounding information in good sounding writing form, and it'll put the citation in APA 7th format and everything, and you'll check for that citation and it doesn't exist. And so, like,
yeah.
this is very clearly generated by AI and not you, students. So I had some hard
Mhm.
conversations to have with students last semester.
Yeah.
And this semester, I'm starting out and I will tell them directly, look, AI makes up stuff. It
Yep.
really, really does. And
Yep.
so even if the information is reasonable, this is not acceptable for, yeah. So
Yeah.
you've got
Yeah.
the issue in a chatbot that's not as serious as that, but and this is where I think like I had a comment on the blog that I write for like language learning, and somebody had commented on a post that I had about a critique of some teaching methodology that I had observed. And the comment was like, this is ridiculous. Don't you know AI is just going to take over all your jobs? You shouldn't be fighting about these little minor issues. And I'm thinking like, I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah.
did calculators end math learning?
Right.
It transformed it to some degree.
For sure.
It's changed it. It's definitely made some possibilities for everyday use of math that
Yeah.
I personally wouldn't have done if I didn't have a calculator. But that likewise with AI use, I mean, are they going to be using it for certain things to expand our abilities with language? Yeah, but it doesn't mean that we don't need language learning, even for just the communication tool of language,
Right.
but
Right.
the human tool of communication and
Yeah.
cultural understanding is never going to be
Right.
gone. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that humans still have the expertise on,
Hmm.
well beyond an AI chatbot. And so,
Yeah. There's
or
a
any other use
yeah.
of AI to translate or to facilitate language use.
Yeah. There's a couple of years ago I watched it was a Billie Eilish interview with a AI robot,
Mm.
and the way she treats it is very inhuman. And
Hmm.
I kept thinking, oh, I wonder if in the future the robots are going to care. But
Yeah, are
it's
they
also
gonna, or people
shows
gonna acclimate to it, or are they gonna
it
differentiate,
it
or
would
that
ask
feels
weird
uncomfortable to
questions. It would
treat a
ask
human-like thing
Sure.
differently.
But it would ask questions that if it were a human, people would say that human is weird. Like that was a weird question.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so we could put it in the show notes for the link. But
Yeah.
I imagine my students would treat a chatbot the same if they were just put in the auditorium with their individual devices and there were no teachers and it's like, okay, just do your learning because school saves money this way. I imagine they would write it off. Like there wouldn't be much
Hmm.
engagement.
Yeah.
Humans, there's something social about humans that's just part of a normal thing that's people
Yeah.
act in an unhealthy way when it's not with a
Yeah.
human.
And
Yeah.
and I wonder if there's a thing like you may have seen there's studies of reading in paper books versus reading in an ebook. And retention is better from the paper book. And it's not just older people who always grew up with a paper book and now they
Mm.
can't handle the ebook. It's young people
Yeah.
who have been around technology all their lives. They retain more from the paper.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's going to be an analogous thing with communicating with a tech bot-like
Sure.
thing
Sure.
versus communicating with a human? Is there a qualitative difference that just can't
Yeah.
totally, it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
There's a bit
it's
of
not,
CA research coming out, I think I feel like it's more teacher education,
yeah, I've seen
CA
some.
conversation
Hmm.
analysis research with AI. I don't know about, I'm sure there is some classroom directly research as well, but
Hmm.
I haven't kept up with that recently.
Yeah.
Um, I think the last
Yeah.
thing I
So
would
it,
say, yeah, go ahead.
so I was thinking like, yeah, the potential uses of this, like you were saying, if students already have some sense of the content that they're asking about or talking about. The one kind of chatbot that I haven't explored as much, even though I mean I programmed it to do this, but the make up a persona and let the chatbot imagine, that I haven't done so much. Like I didn't ask my chatbot, hey, so you say you're this old and you're from this part of China and stuff. So when did you grow up in the, did your
Yeah,
parents experience this? Or yeah,
yeah, yeah, and that would be a great, yeah. So as a follow-up supplement kind of role
right.
after students have done something
Have
that's
some
been checked and
basic.
created by humans,
Yeah,
competent subject area expert humans.
yeah.
Yeah, then go on and have fun
I
with
do, yeah.
hallucinations. Yeah,
I do love that there is the option for individual, tailor-made conversations
yeah,
for them to have at right at their level because they can adjust it just as they need. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, to what quality of individualization, and I'm not sure yet.
yeah, yeah. Well, the note I want to end on, I think, is what you can do with it afterwards. So printing out a transcript of your entire conversation can be the product of the physical, observable product of your interaction with the
Yeah,
chatbot. And then you can use that text for other things, for follow-up reading, for other kinds of classroom discussions.
yeah, that'd be great.
Students could do pair things with it. Read and
Yeah.
draw, read and discuss. There's a lot of things you could do with that printout of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy to get in the Magic School chatbot thing. Like there's a place you can select just the responses from the chatbot or the whole conversation back and forth as I think it was a PDF option.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll definitely link to that. As Magic School is free for educators, and you can then sign students into it, as I understand. I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah. I only did it from my own personal account. And the way I get into it is that I take the link and then open it in a new tab as if I'm a student jumping in. But then I lead the whole class in a whole class discussion. That's how I've done it.
Yeah, yeah. Cool.
Okay. This has been a good topic. I think there's so much more to say about this, and so we'll save AI topics for another episode.
Yep. All righty.
Okay. Thanks for
Good talking
listening.
to you.
All right. I've been Reed Riggs.
I'm Diane Neubauer.
All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.